Hi, I'm Kelly Vaughn, and welcome to Inside Indy. And I think you're going to want to turn up the volume on your television because this is a very interesting topic. It's a deep topic. We're going to be talking about the broken family in America. And joining us in the studio to talk about that, to offer some insight and possibly some solutions, is Michael Tibbetts. And you are the founder and chief inspirational officer of the Family Center for the Sacred Heart. Welcome back.
Well, it's my pleasure to be back again.
To Inside Indy.
Kelly, thank you.
Let's talk about the Family Center for Sacred Heart, what it is, and how you play a role there.
Sure. Well, I founded the ministry in 2012. I've actually been doing the work since 1985, almost 34 years. God has allowed me to lead my family's own healing process. And I believe there are three core wounds in our culture. I call it SAM. It's like a SAM missile. It drops in the middle of the family and blows everything up. S stands for sexual abuse, A stands for addiction, and M stands for mental health issues. And the reason I know that is our family has all three. So we hit the genetic jackpot.
Wow.
And our family, because of the pressure of those three things, I mean, just one by itself puts tremendous pressure on the family. But our family couldn't survive the pressure of all three. We just didn't have the coping skills. And so, but God said, if you don't work on your own healing and that of your family and that of other families, one of these things, or all three in combination, they're deadly. They're deadly. You know, they can kill people. You know, well, we know, reading in the news how addiction kills people. Right. You know, the whole opioid crisis.
Right. That kind of thing. It's crazy.
And you know, there's a lot of violence in relationships, and
they're not easy, are they?
No. Well, love is not just a feeling; it's more it's a decision. I'll talk more about that later.
Okay.
Because if it were just a feeling, feelings are like the weather. You know, wait a minute and they'll change. Okay.
Right, so, especially here lately.
Well, the average marriage in America right now is 7 years. Okay.
Is the average length of
a marriage,
marriage.
In America is 7 years.
Okay.
And in our parents' generation, grandparents, that was like the 7-year itch, you know, when you hit that first bump in the road.
Right. So what is the number one cause of a family/marriage breaking down that you've found in your studies?
Well, there's two or three. I think the number one is communication.
Yeah, I always hear that, communication.
Sexual intimacy issues.
Okay.
And the third is probably finances.
Okay. And I had to write those down. I just So what's lacking in communication?
A lack of personal responsibility, taking responsibility for your own stuff, your own thoughts, feelings, and behavior. Thinking generates, or feelings generate, thoughts generate feelings, which may or may not lead to behavior. I'm a recovering rager, okay? So I used to go from rageful thoughts right into rageful feeling, right into rageful behavior. I didn't know you could take a pause between the thinking and feeling stage to the behavior stage. See, we're a very reactive culture. We go right from the feelings right into the behavior. And you don't hear people talking about personal accountability. It's all about victimhood. It's all about, well, he or she made me do that. Well, no one can really make you do something short of putting a gun to your head. You know, so we are responsible for our own thoughts, feelings, and behavior, and I teach a lot of that in my ministry.
It sounds like, though, you've taken your own situation, your own family, and it is a big part of your whole foundation in terms of you've been there.
Yes.
And you've had a lot of those symptoms, and is part of it that you're working on yourself and your family, and
yes,
to heal it.
Yes, and we're at different stages of healing, and it begins with my own healing, taking responsibility, you know, for my own stuff. My primary thing was looking at my raging and getting healing through spiritual healing, through counseling, and through the influence of my church. And there's something, I'm sure you're familiar with Alcoholics Anonymous. or maybe Al-Anon. I've been an Al-Anon for 34 years.
Wow.
In Al-Anon, that taught me to take personal responsibility for my own stuff. The only life I can change is my own.
Right.
I can influence other people by being a positive role model, but my job is not to change them. I can only change myself.
Right.
So
It's kind of like what they say about owning your own stuff, owning your own sin, owning your own.
yes.
And it almost sounds like that's where a lot of it starts. Because if you don't deal with your own stuff,
Right.
yeah.
Well, because it's easy, you can get distracted out here. It's called codependency, where you're trying to take care of everybody else, but you're really not looking at yourself and what you're bringing into those other relationships. And I learned something from Al-Anon. It's called HALT. It's my medicine I take every day to continue to manage my rage, because like any addiction, if I don't manage it, it's doomed to come out, and I'll act out, and I'll go back to where I was years ago, where I was not a very pleasant person to be around.
Okay. Wow.
And HALT stands for hungry, angry, lonely, and tired.
Okay.
Okay, and hunger can be physical hunger. It also can be spiritual hunger. Okay, so every day I measure my hunger, anger, loneliness, and tiredness. If that's in pretty good balance, then I'm a pretty nice person to be around. If I'm not working on that stuff, you need to run for the hills.
Run for the hills. Okay.
And I need to be put in quarantine.
Thanks for the warning.
I need to be put in quarantine there.
Some of the information that you sent me, which I just think is fascinating, because we first talked about let's talk about the state of families.
Okay.
What you're seeing in your practice, where we are. Let's talk about the state of families, relationships, what's going on, and how bad is it?
Well, I'm going to focus on the broken family per se. I mean, all families are dysfunctional at some level. It just depends upon the degree.
Okay. That makes me feel better. Go ahead.
Well, the culture is very dysfunctional. I mean, just look at the news. I mean, and looking at the news every day, you can kind of see content people don't make other people miserable. You know, the violence in the world, I believe, is a lack of individual serenity, or peace, inner peace, well-being. So,
Okay.
and then if you could spread that, you know, to others, but
Right.
it starts with the individual. It's like throwing a stone in the pond and watching the ripple effect. You know, the stone is myself or you, the individual, making the changes, throwing in the pond of healing, and then there's a ripple effect to others.
Okay. Okay.
Does that make sense?
Makes a lot of sense. Yeah. But the family is broken down,
Yes.
and so with that brokenness, identify the symptoms of a broken family.
Yeah. Well, the broken family cost America $112 billion a year, in a reflection of poverty, unemployment, crime, substance abuse, and mental health conditions, and out of wedlock children. Right now, the average out of wedlock is 41% in the country.
Wow. Okay.
And I think that breaks down to like 26% in the white community. In 1960, that figure was 6%.
Wow.
You know, and Hispanic community, I think, is about 53, 54, and then it moves all the way up to 72% in the black community.
Wow.
For an average of 41.
Wow.
But, you know, the breakdown in the family, in the black, you see it with the lack of, fatherly guidance, you know.
So in some sense, you're saying that the family didn't break down; it just never even got started. Because you've got breakdown of the family where you've got a family, there's a mother and father and children, and you've got maybe where you're married, or perhaps, again, some people have a common law situation that have been together for years and years. And I'm not justifying, I'm just saying that is what it is.
Sure.
And that breaks down. And then
Right.
you have something where it never gets to break down because it never started.
Right. Well, that's a good point. Some of the factors causing the breakdown include taking prayer out of the schools.
Okay.
Then we have the sexual revolution, which began in the 60s, the sex, drugs, and rock and roll. The whole adage, if it feels good, do it. That's where I believe the lack of personal responsibility began. Okay. Then we have the advent of no-fault divorce. If it's nobody's fault, then no one has to take any responsibility. And there's, again, you're getting back to love is not just a feeling, but it's ultimately a decision.
Okay. I agree with you. I have said that before, like, where did that come from? But I thought that was the courts reacting to, relationships are so complicated, and they get in court and they hear, well, he did this and she did that, and they want to fool with it.
Yeah, yeah.
And to me, in a lot of ways, it hurt, in my opinion, it hurt women more than it hurt men.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, it was, I think, like you said, it was getting very combative in the court system. And
They didn't want to hear it.
No.
And it is very complicated. Yeah, it's got, like, we just won't deal with it.
Sure.
Yeah.
And then, I talked about the cornerstone of the out-of-wedlock children, and that's the fourth factor in the breakdown.
Wow, that's interesting about this, the sexual revolution. So when did that take? Was that late 60s, early 60s?
Yeah,
when did
early
that?
60s, yeah, early middle. I mean, it was, I think, the analogy for it was Woodstock, which was in 1969, the Woodstock Festival. I don't know if you've heard about that.
Yeah, I'm old enough to know it.
Well,
but that's okay, because I'm glad you thought that I wasn't. But we're going to take a break, and when we come back, we're going to talk more about the sexual revolution and Woodstock after this. And we're back here on Inside Indy talking to Michael Tibbetts, who is the founder and chief inspirational officer for the Family Center for the Sacred Heart. We're talking about the breakdown of the family, and we were reminiscing on the whole sexual revolution. And again, it was a little bitty thing when that happened. But so what was that, and what do you think caused it?
good Lord.
In a nutshell.
That's right. I'm going to have CNN after me.
Okay.
Well, each generation kind of flips. Like, my parents were pretty conservative. They grew out of the Depression, okay? It was, everything had its place about rules and, rules and consequences. And then you flip, I guess it happened out in California and San Francisco with, the alternate lifestyle, sex, drugs, and rock and roll. Along that went some attitudes about don't trust authority, whether it's in the form of parents, teachers, the armed services. And
maybe the assassination of Kennedy had something to do with that.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. I think back when I was little.
You had the three assassinations, Kennedy, Martin Luther King, and Robert Kennedy.
Yeah, blowing people's heads off would kind of do that.
Yeah,
I can see that. I was too little. I don't remember Kennedy being shot, but I remember my parents talking about it in the aftermath.
Well, JFK was really the hope for the future, and then he got snuffed out. I mean, I was in 10th grade when that happened. I can remember where I was. And,
right, yeah.
I mean, we had a whole weekend of mourning, and it was,
I can remember that having, okay. And I guess the one thing about the breakdown of the family, and because I kind of have some thoughts on what happened with my own family, and then like my grandfather, who was part of the Pentecostal movement in Indianapolis, which is actually the Pentecostal movement of the whole world, that he was a very devout Christian man, and he lived by the rules.
Right.
But what I have found in my old age is that a lot of times a lot of rules were there, especially when my parents got married. They got married because my mom got pregnant, and that's what you got married, right?
Sure.
But that it didn't mean necessarily that the fathers always played by the rules. That we have these rules, and then I got a feeling when I was coming up the sexual revolution, some of it was women got tired of, I'm trying to play by the rules,
right?
And he's in the office and he's running around with the secretary, and I'm kind of fed up with that. And my mother used to always tell me, always have your own. And so there was a lot of suffering there because she wasn't the breadwinner. She had no money. And if a man does not abide by God's rules, and he doesn't respect God's authority, and then he's not going to be the father and the husband that he's supposed to be. So a lot of women got tired of that. Like, I'm not doing that.
No, I know what you're saying. We're the last generation really to be brought up according to God's rules. And then kind of the breakdown really is a reflection of humanity thinking they know better than God.
I can appreciate that.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, makes a lot of sense.
So part of my ministry is to help people, again, the behavior and consequences. Well, none of our family should be alive today. I mean, because of what we've been through, but through the grace of God we are. And what we've been through, no family is immune from. So everything I've learned from my own family healing, I pass on to other families, because I call it the same play with a different cast of characters.
You say there are a lot of social and economic consequences of all this
Yes, yeah,
bad
exactly.
behavior, so to speak.
Exactly, well, the unemployment, the crime, the poverty, the substance abuse.
How do those things impact or cause poverty and the drug abuse? How do you see that? With the connection there?
Well, poverty is really an inability. It's ability to maintain work or well, I was out of work for 5 years between 90 and 95. And
so was the rest of the country, by the way.
Yes, I know. So there was a time I didn't think I'd ever work again. You know, but again, it was that was my desert period, and that's where that's where God taught me to learn how to put Him first. Okay, when you put God first, everything else kind of falls on the line. Does that make sense?
No, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah.
Our family's a testament to the grace of God, and His grace is available to all of us every moment of every day.
Right.
And I'm blessed to be able to see that.
So how do you go about helping families to heal? Do you get what? Because a lot of times, it could take place, but people won't cooperate.
Well, exactly.
Like you say, let's go to counseling. They don't want to go to counseling.
Well, I'm not a counselor. I have the counseling gift. I don't have the certification, so I call myself a teacher or a trainer or a coach. But I'm using the same gifts. Basically, I help people define, well, what do you see as your primary healing need?
So if somebody is out there watching now and they're a part of a family and they know that things are really shaky right now, there's a lot of fighting and instability, how would you help them, just even here on television? How would you help them
basically
heal?
I would, they could call me at 937-435-8468 or email me at patriarch, that's PATRIARCH at WOH.RR.com. And I call that my soothing space. It's allowing people to talk and just share with me what's troubling them. And between the two of us, the hour sessions, it only is for a donation of $75 per hour, which I think is very reasonable. And we just go through a process of determining what is the problem, and then each successive session is drawing up an action plan to help them work through their primary need.
And I would think that some of that, and I love that some of that, they may be willing to be open to making changes and doing better or seeking God for answers. But as you said earlier, you can't control the other person. So how do you get them to come to the table?
Well, that's the hardest thing. That's what I call the leap of faith, and that's when they're most scared. So my hand is, I'm sending them like I send you quotes and articles and stuff like that, and I do that. And at some point, they absorb some of this information. They say, well, maybe I got something I need to work on. So I always tell them that my hand is always extended to help them take that leap of faith, to ask for help and to work on, what is the problem that you're dealing with? Because sometimes people can't identify what it is. So I can help them identify it, and then I say, well, would you like to take steps to,
Okay. Okay.
It's always asking them permission because they have the power,
Right. Now let me ask you this, because I have deep thoughts about this kind of issue, and my question is, when I see what I see in our society is as you said, the breakdown of the family, and as you mentioned, the African American community, 72%, and the father is not there, And so, but my feeling about it, whether you're an African American or otherwise, there's something in our culture that people are not, I don't know if they see it like I see it, but they're not pro-family, pro-kids.
Yes,
and,
right.
and my best example I give is when you have the Maury Povich show. They have an entire television show based on, is he or is he not the father? And then the guy's like jumping around on the stage because he's so glad he's not. So that makes me feel as a woman, and I'm way past my childbearing years, but if I were in my teens or 20s, like, oh my God, they're not even interested in being taught. They're running it. They don't even like it. And so why are we raised that? What is going on in our nation? Even as when you're children, don't play with the baby. Don't play with the doll. It's the woman's place. So how are men ever going to embrace the whole being a father if everybody's running away from it?
Well, they have to be retrained, okay?
But how do we get there? Where does that come from? It's just like it's killing it. It's killing our country. This whole thing about being, I don't have children because I was terrified of even having a child because, they didn't want you to get pregnant when you were 13.
Sure.
And so everything was like, don't have a baby, don't go get your education, don't have a baby. Everything is so negative, baby.
Yeah, well, it's the contrast between a God-centered life and a secular life, okay? And they're two different value systems.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Well, they have the Ten Commandments.
Right, but Michael, I know, but what we do then I just heard in the Southern Baptist deal that they're talking about child abuse in the church. We know we've heard about what's happened in the Catholic Church. So then when you hear that, I'm driving in my car, listening to the radio, and they're talking about ministers abusing children.
Oh, yeah.
And it's so then you start to really lose faith, not in God necessarily, but in okay, if they're doing it, is anybody trying to do the right thing?
Well, sexual abuse, I think, is the number one, the core problem, wound in our culture, okay? You see it with the trafficking coming across the border, okay? And then now you're seeing ads about if you've been sexually abused by a scout leader, they have a line for that, okay?
Right.
So it's...
Wow.
It's like
you said they have a line for it.
Yeah, well, because you can't heal something until you know what the problem is.
Right,
okay, so you got to name it, and our culture unfortunately teaches people if you have problems then somehow you're failing. So no one wants to feel like a failure.
Right.
All right. So we keep all this stuff hidden, Right. But it's our wounds, not healing our wounds, that keep us stuck, that keep us sick. So the only reason someone changes their behavior is they get sick and tired of the pain they're experiencing in their current lifestyle, and they don't know what the answer is. I had to get sick and tired of. The only reason I changed my raging behavior because I was in danger of losing my family forever. And that was not an acceptable outcome.
So you're afraid of consequences?
Oh yeah. Well, they were again behavior and consequences. Okay. But we really don't talk about consequences now. I mean, you see, the attitude in the secular world often is, well, I'll do it and then I'll figure some way to get away with it. It's like with the drug thing, there in the courts there's a slap on the wrist. Now you're having this movement about legalization of drugs and all that. Well, in my opinion, and this is just my opinion, addiction is a life threat, and not all using pot leads to addiction, okay? But I still believe it's an entry-level drug that can lead to other things, Okay. So again, it's behavior consequences.
Right. So, well, we're out of time, and we can, if you're back in Indy again, because I know you're operating out of Ohio, but you are available to folks here in Indianapolis, and we have your information on the screen.
Yep.
Got 30 seconds left. You were going to add something?
Yeah, I was just going to have a closing statement here.
Go ahead.
If you want to contact me, I gave you the email and the phone number. You had that on
the
there.
Screen.
Is the website also on there? Great. Okay. So those are 3 ways you can contact me. In closing, I'd just like to say I'm the bridge of hope to help people take that first fearful step onto God's healing path, regardless of what you're facing. I've survived all the human bad times. There's nothing out there that surprises me or I know someone who has. So again, I'd be very surprised if someone came to me with a problem I haven't personally experienced someone who has. I've helped thousands of people take that first leap of faith. I'm not saying it's easy, but it's life-saving both for you and your family. I took that first healing step for my own family in 1985 and never have regretted it. Healing is not easy work, you know. I mean, it's one step at a time. Mm-hmm. And through God's ever-present grace, the best days for my family are ahead of us. Please reach out and take my hand onto God's healing path.
All right. Michael Tibbetts, thanks so much for joining us.
It's a pleasure.
And healing us
thank
here
you.
on Inside Indy. And thank you for joining us. I'm Kelly Vaughn. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye.